my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo. Where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and it is Thursday, so it means it's time for our Thursday Trends episode. Flying solo on today's show, and yeah, I mean it's gonna be a weird one. I'll be frank. I'll be completely, honest about, it's a weird episode. We're gonna talk about, obviously, Donald Trump's assassination attempt, and regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, if you will, it's a dark time period in our country. There's no way around that, and I'll touch on this, more as we get into it. But like, I can't help but just like, I took a couple days from like really being on social media just because it was like, man, it's dark. It's a dark time period, and it's exhausting to even talk about this stuff and think about it, But we do have to address it, so I'll touch on that. Also, I guess piggybacking off of that, just heavy shit. There was an alleged neo-Nazi that was trying to plot a mass attack in New York. We'll touch on that. On a lighter side of things, we'll touch on how apparently, according to the ladies of TikTok, Latin men are basically trash and we're not romantic anymore. So we shall discuss. And then on the positive side of things, Emmy nominations were announced, and we had a lot of Latina representation. So absolutely love that. So we will celebrate that. But first and foremost, as we always do, let's just start off with the nonsense, the heaviness, the BS in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
All right, so I'll start with the Trump stuff, and I'm not gonna go into great detail about the specifics of it all. I think if you really want to dive into like the background of the would-be assassin and all the events taking place and security lapses and all these things, there's just better platforms to break that all down for you. The obvious is that this past weekend, I believe it was on Saturday evening, Donald Trump was at a rally in Pennsylvania, and a man attempted to assassinate him and came within inches of delivering a probably deadly shot to the head, right? Inevitably, yeah, there's no way around it, right? So sadly, one person did die. I think two others were injured. The shooter was killed by law enforcement. And Trump, I'm hearing conflicting things. His ear was either grazed by the bullet or the teleprompter shattering the glass is what actually cut his ear. Either way, he was within inches of his life being over. And, I've been a staunch Donald Trump hater, if you will. I'm not going to walk that back or anything, and it's how I feel. But even with that, it's not lost on me the gravity of this situation, and I think what it says about the United States of America currently, that in 2024, a former president and a presidential candidate currently almost lost his life. And yeah, like I started the show with, it's been heavy on social media and news and all these things. Just because I think also, for me, what I really wanted to touch on is like the finger pointing that begins to happen, right? And I don't think that there is any excuse whatsoever for violence ever. I don't think that there is any reasoning behind, that like for this to potentially have happened, other than the fact that this person was not mentally in a good place, in a stable place, and very obviously should not have had access to a weapon. But I think it's, and maybe it's too soon to, I wouldn't say the conversation's happening. I think what's frustrating is now the further division that begins to happen, and kind of like the revisionist history that is happening now, because the attempted violence was against someone who was Republican. And this is where I'm like, I'm pulling my hair out almost, it feels like, and what gets me feeling like I'm crazy, because you go on social media and you'll see the dialogue that's happening, right? And I like on my TikTok feed randomly popped up was like somebody like, you see the Republican nominee was almost assassinated, and no Republicans were out in the street rioting and burning things down. And it was like, did you guys forget what happened January 6th at the Capitol? When your candidate lost, you guys literally attacked a government building and were threatening the lives of sitting members of the government, of Congress, assaulting police officers. And what gets you, like, I don't know, for me, what makes me, it gets even more frustrating, you look at some of the comments and it's deranged, right? It's like people are living in their own false sense of reality, right? You have people in those comments, responding to somebody saying, did you forget about January 6th? Somebody's like, they were invited in. The doors were opened for them. Dude, there is footage of police officers being smashed between doors trying to hold people back. Like, the information is out there if you want it, but we live in a time period where people literally want to just live in a false reality. And I see like the posts about like, this is why words matter. They call Trump Hitler, and of course somebody's going to try to assassinate him. Dialogue matters when it's being spoken about on the media and people at large platforms. Where was that same energy when Nancy Pelosi's husband was attacked in a politically motivated assault at their home, where somebody with a hammer, could have beaten this man to death? You had Republicans posting memes. I mean, Trump posted something about his Halloween costume. He had a Paul Pelosi Halloween costume, and it was like a pair of tighty whities and a hammer. They were making jokes about political violence. And I can remember, around the time of COVID, talking about like rhetoric matters. The then President Trump talking about the China virus, China. It was like, yeah, of course we saw hate crimes against Asian Americans going up, or the rhetoric around, immigrants right now. And of course we're seeing like immigrants being targeted. But again, that's not real. It doesn't matter. I remember having people saying, oh, well, these are adults. They shouldn't be influenced by anybody regardless of their following. And now it's a complete 180 and a revisionist history. And again, I'm not condoning this or lessening the moment that happened. But it's hard. But I think what it really began to point out to me, it's like, man, people are really living in their own false reality. And obviously you know it by some of the things you hear, the rhetoric you hear, but it's really scary. And maybe I've been reading too much about like AI and just the idea of like men in general. There's like studies being done and showcasing that like men in general are becoming increasingly more depressed and angry and violent, or taking their own lives at higher rates. And there's sort of this, really dark norm that's happening, this sort of anti-man rhetoric, if you will, overcorrection kind of happening, where a lot of men, particularly like younger generations, are angrier and angrier and lonelier than ever. And I'm not trying to go like Andrew Tate on this either, where it's like, superior man and alpha male and all this bullshit. But I think as with anything, everything is nuanced. The truth lies somewhere in the middle. And I think we've done an amazing job at women's rights and progressing the power that women have in their lives and in this country, in the workplace, and in every aspect of it. But I do think at times, as with anything, what starts out as good ends up having a bit of an overcorrection. And I've noticed this rhetoric around, in conversation with some of sort of my more, I guess, feminist-leaning female friends. And their sort of norm is women's empowerment at the sort of detriment of men, almost, right? And I'm kind of getting in a weird off-topic thing, but I guess to tie it all together to a degree, the shooter was like a young man, right? And as most mass shooters are, right? Most acts of violence and things like that. And yeah, I just think it's an interesting time period. And I'm not like, and these again are nuanced conversations. They're tough to have because the immediate sort of response to me as a man saying this, it's like, well, you're a guy, of course you're a heterosexual cisgendered male, of course you're going to be threatened by the idea that men aren't as running things anymore. And that's not what I'm speaking of at all. Like I think I believe that we can have women's empowerment, but we also don't have to tear down the other side, because I think we then just keep, like, the pendulum just keeps violently swinging, right, in either direction, and we never get to a place of like peace and balance, which is the goal, right? I think whenever you have progression at the expense of another group of people, it never ends well, right? One side's going to become resentful, and then the side that like was once persecuted ends up becoming the persecutor, right? If that makes sense. And I'm just like flushing out thoughts here that are kind of coming up in general, but I think sort of what I was getting at with that, I've been listening to this podcast in particular. I can't remember the guy's name. I'll try to think of it at some point. I want to get him on the podcast, but he had some really interesting points about the sort of loneliness that a lot of men are experiencing, and the anger, and how a lot of men are like turning it to isolation almost, and how technology, things like porn and, VR and, really just like these acts of loneliness and lack of human interaction, right? And men not, it's something like 1 in 3 men can't name a best friend, and like different statistics you hear like that are sort of, it's creating like this epidemic of just like really angry, violent, and lonely, sad, depressed men, right? And there have been a lot of studies and correlations between sort of these acts of violence, these mass shootings and things like that. And yeah, and that sort of again ties to me when I look at a lot of the commentary politically. People really are living in their own sort of dystopian, false reality. And social media obviously plays a gigantic role in that because of the algorithms and what it feeds us, right? If we want to see outlandish conspiracy theories, 24 hours a day, the algorithm is going to happily feed that to us, right? And it begins to rot our brain away. And another thing that was being brought up, like in that kind of what I'm referencing, it talks about how like young men are far more inclined to believe conspiracy theories than women. And it's sort of, it's like people who are really going through it, trying to find sense of it all, right? A reason why they feel shitty, right? They're trying to find an explanation as to why their life isn't what they hoped it would be. And that's why people like Andrew Tate have been able to capitalize on that, right? Like this whole red pill movement and this idea of like the alpha male and selling you on this, disgusting narrative of the mistreatment of women and being ultra tough and all. Like, it's people are hurting. There's a lot of people really just, I don't know, fucked up. And I think, for lack of a better, phrasing, which I think we all are to a degree, but they're turning to really tragic means of trying to fill that void, I guess is what I'm talking about. And this person who attempted to assassinate the president is one of them. The people who are blindly following false rhetoric are also a part of that. And then even, segueing into kind of the next story, the rise in white supremacy and how not outlandish, but it is outlandish, but like how bold they've become that they don't even feel the need to hide it anymore, right? There was this story in Tennessee where you had white supremacists like neo-Nazis marching proudly in the street. And then this story here where you had an alleged neo-Nazi being accused of plotting a mass attack in New York. So a federal grand jury in New York City has handed down an indictment charging an alleged neo-Nazi leader with plotting a deadly attack on Jews and racial minorities. On Tuesday, the Justice Department announced that a 21-year-old Georgian national named Mikolai, last name is crazy. It's like Javitsvili, Mikolai is as far as I've gotten here. Had allegedly tried to recruit people to commit hate crimes and a mass casualty attack in Brooklyn. Authorities say he was known as, quote, Commander Butcher. That's cute. And led a white supremacist group called the Maniac Murder Cult. This guy was running a white supremacist group that called themselves the Maniac Murder Cult. One of the schemes that he is accused of plotting involved having someone dress up as Santa Claus and give out poisoned laced candy to racial minorities and children at Jewish schools in Brooklyn. And the article goes on to say, combined with a resurgence of racist hate speech on X and other social media platforms, and they mention the marching in Nashville, these indictments, they say, point towards a spike in unabashed racism. And again, further proof that rhetoric matters and that you can't ignore it just because it's not in line with, your political ideology. And it's scary. I read that and I think to myself, man, I'm walking through New York a fair amount. At times, I am wearing something that might have a Puerto Rican flag on it, or I am someone who, has a beard and gives off some sort of ethnicity. What if one of these guys decided that they were going to enact one of their crimes against me and I'm just walking around the city living my life? Or how disgusting that is to think they're going to give candy dressed as Santa Claus, poison-laced candy dressed as Santa Claus to children. And again, it kind of just speaks to this weird dystopian society that we're in, and how the polarization of politics and the win by any means possible approach that many politicians have is leading towards a really just, I wouldn't even say leading, we're there, a scary place. And this is what's been kind of, I guess, weighing on me is like, it's, you know it's wrong, you want to stand up against it and fight for what's right, but this shit weighs you down. When you read these stories, you can't, if you have a heart, you can't help but be affected by them. I haven't even been as like politically involved or invested as I've been in years past, because it's taken a toll on me. Truthfully, it's taken a toll on me, and obviously, you know, part of it is like the social media aspect of like the free for all that is the comment section, but just being hyper aware of all of the news took a toll on me. Right? Being informed took a negative toll on me. Right? And obviously, like, this is the work of those in the powers that be that don't want change and want to continue to spew hate. They want us to be exhausted and to, you know, feel fear to fight back or to speak out against them, or to just be so weighed down by it all that we sort of are just like, you know what, I'm going to take a back seat to this. Obviously that's what they want, but also it's hard not to just sort of be like, fuck it, I'm going to worry about my own life, my immediate family, and keep it pushing, because this shit is too much. It'd be very easy for me to kind of fall into that trap, and at times I want to, right? So yeah, I don't know. I think just like you read these stories and all that's been going on, it's just like, man, I'm tired, guys. I'm really tired, like, of a lot of these discussions, and like I've definitely, like, I don't want to say I've shied away, but it's like, fuck, man, it's hard to sit down and, like, I'm reading articles and I'm prepping to, like, come on the podcast, and I'm just like, dude, I'm too tired. I don't even want to talk about this right now because it's mentally taxed me already. But then it's like, if I don't talk about it, then these people just run free doing bullshit and hate, right? So it's like, it's a double-edged sword. And yeah, that's all I have on those topics there. We're gonna do like a hard turn and just lighten it up a little bit because we fucking need it. We'll talk about romance and Latin men, but we'll first take a quick break and then we'll be right back. All right, so lightening things up a little bit here. There's an article from We Are Me Too, entitled, "Do Latino Men Need to Step Their Game Up? Some Latinas say that the mamitas and lack of romanticism is real." Now, this is, I think, based off of a viral TikTok video that I guess has been getting piggybacked on the same topic. But in the article they reference it, and they say Latinas on social media are speaking out against some Latino men they encountered in the dating world, and they're not holding back. If you dated a Latino man before, you may have received cartas de amor, serenatas, passenger princess treatment, the works. However, if you didn't receive these things, then you may agree with many women sounding off on TikTok. The consensus is clear. Many Latinas believe Latino men have lost their romanticism of past generations. While we hear stories of our abuela writing a letter to our abuela every single day to win her over, maybe even singing some sort of serenade, Latino men today are becoming lazy when it comes to courtship. And that's a question. Are today's Latino men becoming lazy when it comes to courtship? They say, of course, this may be a problem much larger than our culture, and maybe all men need to step it up. Okay. I don't disagree completely here. And I think to their point, this is probably a larger conversation. I think it's just Latin men. But I guess like the stereotype is like, Latin men are like romantic and like will sweep you off your feet almost, right? So I'm not like offended by that. But you know, it's funny. I was talking about overcorrections. Whenever I read these things and I'm going to give my take, I have to like brace myself. Because like the comment section is in my head of me being called a misogynist and like, like I'm not allowed to have an opinion about topics like that involve men and women, or specifically that involve women, even if it's directed at men. But fuck that. Anyway, that just little inside baseball as to what runs through my head as I collect my thoughts on these things. And actually, what I will say also, what's ironic to me in that same conversation, and I already picture people being like, "Oh, you're just lashing out because people are critiquing men," and like that's an easy take for you to have. That's the surface level, write off everything I'm saying rather than actually having to think critically. So if that's you, I'm sure, write me off. But I think it is interesting that it's like toxic masculinity if a man says he wants a woman to have some more traditional values, but it's completely fine in this context when it's a woman saying she wants a man to be more like how her grandfather was, like a classic sort of stereotypical romantic man, right? But if I say I want you to be more like how my grandmother was, theoretically, this isn't necessarily how I feel, but like I'm not expecting this, but theoretically, like, a waiting hand and foot on the male, that I'm a misogynist and it's toxic masculinity. I just think it's an interesting, ironic thing. Like, and that's not really even the relationship that I want to get into. Like, yes, I do want traditional values, but also I like love the idea of my girl like hustling and doing her thing and having a fulfilled career and all those things. I don't expect life to revolve around me. But with that said, I think this from a male's, I'm giving my perspective, right? My toxic perspective. And I'm actually going to do this for our Ask a Gringo segment and hear different people's perspectives, right? Man and woman, hopefully. But from my perspective on this, I think I consider myself to be a very romantic guy, but I'm also incredibly turned off, I think, by the norm of the modern single woman and her mentality. Because there is, a lot of rhetoric about what a man is supposed to do, and a man is like, the idea of like, they take the idea of provider and then make it mean you have to pay their rent, even though they have a job, right? And you're supposed to like take care of all their bills for no reason whatsoever, and they don't even like know how to maintain a home or something, right? Like, and I'm not saying that that's a woman's only role, but it's relationships are give and take. If I'm a stay-at-home dad and my girl is out there, making the money for the household, when she comes home, yeah, the expectation should be like, I'm probably cooking, I'm maintaining the home, and like, so I'm doing my part in the relationship, right? It's vice versa, but I'm just talking in sense of traditions here, right? Stereotypical gender roles in a heterosexual relationship. But I think for me as like a dude, I want to be romantic. I want to pull out all the stops and all these different things. But there's a real fear, first and foremost, of a lot of women will, in like the social media gossipy era, be like, oh, sounds so thirsty, right? Or it's the expectation of it all, I think, too. It kind of turns me off a bit, and it's like, the idea of like, what is a good first date and all this. And it's like, dude, the goal of a first date is to get to know one another. And it really, it's like the, pre-interview process almost. I mean, shit, you can call it an interview if you want to. Even we'll skip the pre-interview process, go to the interview. It's the first to really see if you guys even click, right? And for me, this is I'm thinking of a lot of different like conversations I've had. I'm trying to contextualize it. For me, like I've had this argument with like female friends, and women would be like, oh, I'm not showing up on the date unless he meets X, Y, and Z requirement of like restaurant, this and that. And like my female friend would be like, dude, but you know how much like a girl puts into getting her hair done and her nails and all that type of stuff. It's expensive. Blah, blah, blah. And like, yeah, I don't doubt that. But like as a guy, you think I'm not putting in any effort? I'm gonna get a fresh haircut. I'm gonna make sure I have a good outfit. I'm gonna wash my car and do all that stuff. And chances are it's on me to plan the date or whatever. So I'm gonna do some research and do those things. Or I'm the one pursuing the woman. So it's like it's both of us are putting forth effort. And the idea that the man, it just shows up, and it's like, that's just not a real thing, right? Unless it's like you're just a real fucking like POS type of dude, you don't give a shit, and you are just low effort for anything, I mean, that's on you if you're a woman and you're choosing to go out with a guy like that. But I think a dude who's genuinely looking for a relationship, who's a good guy, has his shit together, which is the only dudes that you probably should be interacting with, he's putting in effort to try and give off the best first impression as well. And for me, I'm not going to also go out of my way to be overly romantic if I don't know the person, because I think romance is also a very sort of personal thing. But to be perfectly honest and to be really blunt, as a single dude dating, a lot of women I've met are not worth being romantic towards. You know, and I know that's going to rub some people the wrong way, but it's a reality. A lot of women in here I go mansplaining. A lot of what I've recognized is a lot of women adapt that mentality, right? The overcorrection of I'm the prize, me just showing up, you should be honored. And for me, as somebody who values myself, my own self-worth, and doesn't need to be with somebody, I don't fuck with that energy whatsoever, because I'm not just happy to have you sitting in front of me. Right? If you are if you're stuck up or a boring conversation or you're not putting forth much effort, trust me, I would rather be at home on the couch with my dog watching TV. I work all the time. I would love to not have to be out and about doing something for no reason whatsoever. Right? That's my mindset. So I immediately do not subscribe to that idea that I'm lucky that you're even there. Nah. We're both lucky that both of us are putting forth effort, right? Especially if we're both people of quality. But that doesn't, but like one more valuable than the other, I don't subscribe to that. I really don't. And I think, you know, that is part of what holds me back, is a lot of the modern attitude about dating. And listen, I don't take away from the fact that there have been a lot of shitty dudes out there who've mistreated women and created this very toxic narrative that many women subscribe to now, just as like a defense mechanism, right? I don't take away from that. But the answer to violence is not more violence, basically, right? So the answer to being to like a shitty person or shitty mistreatment is not to out shitty the other, gender, essentially, right? And I think that is where we're like, why modern dating is so rough, right? Because let's be honest here, both sides complain about modern dating, and often the ones that we hear about a lot are women. So neither one of us are doing it right? You got your attitude that you currently have, the modern general consensus of a lot of single women of a certain generation. Obviously, that's not working for you either, because you're still single and bitter. Just like men are single and bitter, right? So obviously either fucking norm is not working out for either of us. Now, beyond that, I do think there is some truth here. I do think that I think a lot of us are products of the idea that like, you get, the idea that relationships aren't work. I think that's probably the general start of it all, right? And I think a lot of times what happens is we sort of, as with anything, I think even jobs, like this is just normal mentality. We forget about maintenance, ongoing maintenance to sustain a quality of life almost, right? And I think the same thing happens in relationships where maybe at the beginning you put forth all the effort and you get the girl or whatever, and then you kind of put it in autopilot because I think we haven't normalized the conversation around the idea that you have to keep, dating your significant other. You have to keep the spark alive somehow. You have to keep maintaining the relationship and fixing things as they go wrong and adjusting to changes and whatever it might be, and just continue prioritizing that person, right? It's not a one and done type of thing. Once you get them, that's it. And I think that's probably part of what's missing. And I also just think, man, it's a weird sort of dating culture as well, I think. I think we've normalized just a lot of nonsense. I think a lot of people also aren't clear on what they want, so they end up hanging out with the wrong. I think a lot of people are also just fixated on bullshit. It's just it's a lot of different things. And I don't even know if I got to my own point on this or whatever it might be. But what's interesting to me? I think a lot of times, and this is a real thing. I think as men, we oftentimes feel unappreciated. And again, I'm not asking you to don't pull out your tiny violins and like it's not woe is me. But I'm thinking back right now. I know for sure in my younger years, I was like a hopeless romantic from start to finish. I liked the girl. I was pulling out all the stops. I was like, saying sweet and kind things. And I had my heart broken a lot doing that. I was disappointed a lot. I had women just fucking ghost me doing that. And when I flipped a switch on my head and became more of an asshole and more of a fuckboy, I got more girls. I had girls chasing me. I had all of the female attention that I had ever wanted because I adopted an asshole mentality. So yeah, maybe men are not being as romantic anymore. But also, maybe that's the result of us not seeing romance working. And again, that's not to each their own. Some guys are just assholes. But I think for me, as somebody who's wanted to do things the right way, being a romantic didn't get me the results I wanted. Being an asshole did. And that speaks to the psychology of what women are looking for, what they accept, what they think is valuable and what they don't, right? And what they appreciate. And I think that is also what's not being spoken about. And I think people are lacking the self-awareness to recognize that. And I think also when we talk about previous generations, you didn't have social media where everything moved so quickly, where now in today's day and age, you have, very limited opportunities to kind of like make an impression on somebody. Or even when you do, a girl's DMs are flooded with potential suitors. And it creates a lot of noise. And maybe they don't get to know you as well. Or maybe they want to live a certain lifestyle because social media has dictated it and you don't check certain boxes. They're not going to give you a chance to be romantic, right? And I'm giving you from the dude's perspective or whatever. I just think there's a lot more nuance to what's going on in today's day and age. And I think a lot of this shit that we've normalized, like we've normalized bad behavior, shitty behavior, accepting less than what you deserve. And I think it's why dating culture is toxic and fucked and nobody knows what to do, right? And I think that's part of the conversation that people are sort of missing. From a man's perspective, honestly. From like a good dude. Genuinely, I consider myself to be a good dude. I'm somebody who I love myself. I have boundaries. I'm doing the work on myself, right? And I think I have a lot to offer somebody. But because I have a lot to offer somebody, I'm also going to only meet you. I'm going to meet you halfway. I value myself, right? And I think maybe that's not the norm. I don't know, but I do know that I think as a good dude, I've been burned a lot by going above and beyond. And I imagine, judging by like what the conversations are happening, a lot of men probably have been as well. And they've done their own little like private case studies and seen, hey, when I'm like a douchebag and participating in fuckboy games, my DMs are fucking flooded. My text messages are popping. And when I'm actually being a nice guy and I'm trying to like woo a woman, my shit's dry as hell. So I'm just gonna be the asshole, right? And by the way, even like somebody posted like a meme. I'll end on this because I just think it was a great example. Somebody posted a meme and it was like POV, your guy just texted you, a guy you're talking to just texts you like, good morning, beautiful. And it's a woman like rolling her eyes. That's romance. But y'all have been programmed to write it off, to view it as corny, to view it as like simping, as the kids say, right? And that's why romance is dead, because if your reaction to me being romantic is thinking I'm corny and rolling your eyes to it, why the fuck would I continue that behavior? Right? If I'm getting better results from you by taking 5 hours to text you back or falling off the face of the earth for weeks at a time, why would I text you every day or ask you how your day was doing or send you flowers? Your actions are dictating to me that you don't want somebody going above and beyond. And I think that's the real conversation that I think is the bigger conversation as to maybe why romance is dead, dying, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. That's just me. We'll hear from y'all in our As A Gringo segment. But first, we will touch on some positive stuff in our Mi Gente segment regarding the Emmys. Mi Gente. All right, so Emmy nominations happened, and Latinas are out here holding it down. I want to make sure we celebrate them. I'm looking here. Sofia Vergara made Emmy's history as the first Latina nominated for lead actress in a limited series for her role in Griselda, which I absolutely loved that show. So big shout out to her. Just a talented woman who deserves so many more flowers and is way more talented than I think people give her credit for. She's so much more than just being a beautiful woman. Also, from the show The Bear, you had Liza Colon Baez getting nominated for Best Supporting Actress in a Comedy Series. She plays Tina Marrero, who's a cook chef in the show The Bear, which I absolutely love. She crushed it. She also had like a dope episode this season that was just like her backstory, which was really cool to kind of see. You also had Nava Mao, who is nominated for Best Supporting Actress in a Limited or Anthology Series movie. She played Terry in Baby Reindeer, which was a crazy fucking show. And then as far as Latinos go, we had a few in this as well. I'm going to read a couple different ones. Hip Latino, by the way, Latina is who I'm getting this from. Selena Gomez, nominated for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series for her role in Only Murders in the Building. You had Isa Lopez, Best Writing for a Limited or Anthology Series or Movie for True Detective Night Country, which I didn't even know they made another one of those. I kind of tuned out after the one with Colin Farrell, which is kind of a bust. And then here you had the men holding it down here. Nestor Carbonell, Best Guest Actor in a Drama Series, playing Vasco Rodriguez in the show Shogun. So we out here right now, holding it down. And yeah, I get it. It's like, it's all right. It's entertainment. It's Hollywood. Who cares? But listen, man, you gotta celebrate greatness in people's in their industry. I think again, this type of stuff, these actors and actresses and artists in general are paving the way for the future generations of just like acceptance and normalization of seeing, brown faces on television in prominent roles in television shows, which is good for all of us at the end of the day. Now, with that said, let me get y'all's take on one of the topics that we talked about today in our Ask a Gringo segment.
Ask a Gringo. I have a question.
All right, so this was the obvious hot button topic, Latin men and romance. I did a couple different kind of perspectives from this one. The women were a little bit more outspoken, obviously. I asked, are men lacking romance? I asked on my Instagram at DJ Dramos, are men lacking in romance? Because I want to open this up, not just Latin men, but are men lacking in romance? And also for women, like, do you even really want a romantic man? And then I posed for men, are you a romantic or do you hold back, and why? So this question here, the first one aimed at women, are men lacking in romance? Do you even really want a romantic man? Okay. So I got a bunch of responses. Let's see. At It's Cat Lasso said yes. The question here is, how are we defining romance? Bare minimum isn't romance. And I respect that. I think that's actually fair, right? I think the bar is incredibly low, right? To be fair. I know I had my own rant before, but I think that's a great point. Because I remember I went on like a date a while back, and I opened the car door for her to get in. Like I made it a point to do that, and she was like taken aback by that action, as if it was like, the most, I don't know, just like the most romantic thing that anybody's ever done for her. And I think to this point, it's a nice thing that I like to try to do, but I think it's the bare minimum, right? And to be fair, I have to check myself and be like, hey, you're not fucking like, I don't know, who's, I'm not Ryan Gosling over here building a house for a woman or something, right? Or taking her on a boat ride to see the geese or whatever it was, just because I'm opening a car door for her, right? So that's a fair point, I think right there. And let's see, at Jade_Serrani says she had to hit the DMs for the long answer on this one. She said, are men lacking in romance? No. Do you want a man who's romantic? Also no. Interesting. Okay. Here's the deal. This is Jade's words, by the way. Here's the deal. I think what people think of as romance is a nostalgic, idealized version of something we are not going to even be able to obtain in the current state of the world. What I mean by that is often the priorities of both men and women today is literally rooted in survival, at least in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of need status, and it often leaves room for people to perceive that the lack of overextension of, quote, romantic gestures and effort that mom, dad, grandpa, and grandpa's generation put in is due to a lack of care. As a woman peeking around the corner at Project 2025, like, am I going to be in The Handmaid's Tale season 10? Quote, romance is so far down the list of my priorities. That said, thoughtfulness and care go a long way. So I think the real conversation behind that question should be more about is the effort my partner is contributing, showing me love and affection in a way that feels like romance in 2024. I don't want flowers as a romantic gesture. I literally buy them for myself whenever I'm in Trader Joe's. I want the, quote, acts of service that show me you went out of your way to do something for me because you prioritize respect and love me in a romantic way that makes me different from all those others out there. I think we are all figuring out that looks different again in the state of the world, but if we're tuned in, consistent and reciprocating, that energy aligns for others to see it and be, quote, romantic in a new kind of way. Now, Jade said a lot there, but she hit on, Jade should be doing this episode, not me, because she actually articulated something that I completely left out of thought process that I actually do genuinely believe in and agree with. And the point being, we're prioritizing and glorifying the wrong things. Because like a lot of the conversation right around like first dates, it's like, oh, well, is it a nice restaurant? Is he doing these things? And what I've always argued is any man with a credit card can take you to a nice restaurant, right? I can Google hot spots in New York City and make a reservation and drop a few $100s on dinner and wine and dine you in that way. But is that really romantic, right? Is that really me going out of my way? I mean, quite honestly, if I have money, that's the bare minimum, right? Because if I have money, I don't give a fuck about dropping that if I think it's going to impress you. That's a very superficial care. But to Jade's point, acts of service, right? Is this person going out of their way? And I think that is what is sort of missed because we live in a generation where everything is performative and also everything is being compared to what you see on social media. So we look on social media, we see our friends, we see random people we follow, and, you know, they're fucking walking on beds of roses and they're on, you know, being swept away to romantic places and blah, 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 blah. And we're like, oh, that's romance. Or you hear, you know, your dad, he wooed me. I said no to him, and he just kept showing up at my front door or by my window singing to me every day until I went out on a date with him. In 2024, a woman would call me a creep first and then call the police if I showed up at her window trying to convince her to go on a date with me. She would block me if I would texted her, or showed up, or texted her every day, like, hey, would you want to go out with me? I know you, blah, blah. Like, literally, these are the same women that tell men, take a hint. So you can't have it both ways. And to Jade's point, what really matters is this person going out of their way to be a part of my life and to add value to my life, right? And this has been my frustration in the past, right? And I'm not saying I'm like perfect or I'm fucking like, have done no wrongs in relationships. But I know for me, how I have shown somebody that I care about them and that they are on a pedestal for me and that I treat them above and beyond anybody else in my life, is the acts of service, but also time spent and the way that I prioritize them. Because quite frankly, I have a really busy life. And I think we all do in today's day and age where it's difficult and we're all working our ass off and like we're all chasing, more of a work-life balance and all these different things, right? We all have so much going on and so many different opportunities to be spending time doing just about anything. And we never have enough time for ourselves and never have enough time for the ones we love. So for me, there's nothing real romantic than making somebody a priority by saying, like, I'm going to fit you in wherever I can, right? I want to prioritize you and make you a thing in my life and make you a part of my life, even though I have so much on my plate because you're that special to me. I need you to be a part of my life, right? So, yeah, I want to, like, have us get dressed up and go do a fancy date night. I get how there's something to that and there's value to it. But I think we're lacking in the value we add to somebody doing everything they can to fit you into their life. I feel like I sound redundant. Like, I guess, like, for me, there are a lot of days where it's like, like yesterday, from the moment I woke up till the moment I went to bed, I was working on something. And woke up today with still a long to-do list and a never-ending one. So, theoretically, Monday to Sunday, from when I wake up to when I go to bed, my entire schedule could be completely blocked out doing something. But if I care for somebody, and I don't do this for everybody, but for somebody I care about, I'm going to say, hey, you know what? I know this is on my to-do list, but I actually could probably do that tomorrow. I want to go to lunch with this person, or I want to grab dinner, or I just want to meet them for a drink or a coffee. I want to just fit them into my day somehow, some way. And yeah, I understand that that's not going to, like, be this thing that looks great on Instagram for you to post or something your friends are going to be impressed by. But somebody who, if you know the person, you know how busy they are and how much they have going on, you know what that means. You know the sacrifice that they're making. So that's real romance, and vice versa, by the way. Because I've dated women who are super busy, very career-oriented. And when I see them saying, like, man, I've had a crazy fucking week, it's jam-packed, but you know what? I should probably be, like, sleeping, but I really want to see you. Like, Friday night, we're not going to meet up till, like, whatever, later or whatever. But maybe we could, like, just grab a drink or something like that, or just, like, would you want to just low-key just go for a walk or do whatever? Just so we can see each other for a little bit. That's romantic to me. That's like, real right there. Everything else is just noise and nonsense. And I think to Jade's point, that's we've been, like, we're idealizing something that really doesn't exist. I think life was a lot simpler for previous generations, and not to take away from how beautiful those moments are, but I just think we have far more chaotic lives. There's a lot of other shit going on. Most of us are far more overworked and exhausted and anxious and depressed than previous generations. And I think we need to sort of have I don't want to say more realistic, but, like, stop thinking in terms of what's going to look good on social media or what's going to impress my friends when I tell them, what Jimmy did, and start actually looking at what's real effort look like. Because, again, flowers, candy, fancy dinners, that's minimal effort. If I have money to spend, what's a couple $100 on a night to me? It really, like, who cares? Honestly. Because I can tell you as a guy, I've spent a couple $100 on a date for a woman that, when I was in my fuckboy days, that I just wanted to sleep with. So that didn't mean anything to me. I knew if I took her to a nice restaurant and we had a lot of fun together, she'd be more inclined to want to go home with me if she was attracted to me. Right? That's what I was putting myself in the best position to sleep with a woman that I found to be attractive. That's not much effort. Now, a woman that I really liked, I'm going above and beyond to make her a part of my life in some way, shape, or form. Right? I'm whatever. If I'm working in of the vicinity of where she lives, I'm making a point to say, listen, I know it's going to be late. I know, but I would love to just drive by and just like give you a hug on my way home or whatever. That's fucking romance. That's real effort. Right? I would love to just drive by and sit on the porch with you for 30 minutes and just talk about your day. I know we're both busy and it's late and blah, blah. That's real. That's me being romantic. But again, that's not the type of shit that we deem, cool or romantic in today's generation because it's all social media shit. Shout out to Jade for that one. And last thing, because I went super long on that one. Shout out to the homie Brand J Life Coach. She asked her husband, and her husband said he was more romantic when he had more money. So finances, LOL. And I think, that's obviously the misconception as well. I think we have, again, to the point we're making, what is really romantic? We think it's like these grand gestures, but oftentimes it's just seeing the person. What do they need? Or how can I make them feel a part of my life? And that's romance right there. I think that's sort of maybe where men are lacking and what our idea of romance is. And even me, when I was reading that article, I wasn't even looking at it from this perspective, right? Because my mind automatically goes to the classic, romantic high fucking, like not high end, but grandiose first date type of thing. But I think romance, for what it really means, if you really want to feel special and somebody to appreciate you, it doesn't have to be some grandiose thing that looks good on Instagram. Like the most romantic things are oftentimes the most personal, intimate, and on the surface don't look like much. And I think that's something to keep in mind. Shout out to everybody that participated in that one at DJ Dramos if you want to be a part of these conversations. With that said, let's tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion stew.
All right, quickly going to go through this because, not going to lie, I'm sweating in my studio. I have to turn the air conditioner off to record these episodes, and I'm dying. And I feel like I was just, like, screaming, so now I'm, like, out of breath, and it's just humid as all hell in here. Trump, attempted assassination is a dark day for our country, regardless of where you stand politically. But I think the reactions to it, I think what I touched on with the neo-Nazi that has been indicted on potentially trying to plot a mass attack in New York, what we've seen in places like Nashville with neo-Nazis marching in the streets openly, what's been happening on social media on platforms like X, where hate speech is running rampant. I think it's more examples of like this dystopian reality that so many people in this country are living in. So many people who are unhappy and don't have an outlet for it are succumbing to a lot of really dark things. And it's just a heavy place that we're in right now as a country, a society. And yeah, I mean, just be safe out there and mindful of your surroundings and all that's happening. And yeah, I don't know. I wish I had like a good way to turn that around and give you a positive answer, but be mindful of the people in your life and what they might need and don't give up on the fight of trying to do the right thing, I guess, at the end of the day. And then this topic of Latin men and romance, I think men in general and romance, I feel like we solved it. Romance isn't dead. We just have to get off of this toxic fairy tale view of romance that we are expecting, which oftentimes is just the influence of like social media and our friend groups. Then you had Latinas and Latino in the Emmy nominations. again, amazing. Representation is amazing. And then to see people thriving from our community and being celebrated for their art, their craft, it only helps all of us out. So amazing stuff. And yeah, that's it. With that said, try to enjoy your weekend. Get off of social media. That was one of the healthiest things I did, was just like stop checking it for a couple days. I didn't necessarily like have to watch the news for a couple days, and gave myself a mental break. Just go and enjoy yourself, and the ones that you love. And I'll catch y'all on Tuesday with a brand new episode. Till then, stay safe. We'll talk soon. Peace.